You are now entering the Back in Time podcast.
We came, we saw, we kicked its ass.
You're killing me, Smalls.
I'll be back.
Roads. Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Bueller.
My mom always said life was like a box of chocolates.
Keep the change, you filthy animal.
Here are your hosts, Kyle and JD.
All right, welcome back to the podcast. We are joined tonight by the director and the star of The Pretender. Welcome to the show, director Jim Toscano. Jim, how you doing tonight?
I'm good, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And then we have the star of the documentary, Mike Kunda. Mike, how are you?
Yo, guys, it's so good to, somebody wants to talk to me, so that's good. I'm doing well.
Yeah, we are really looking forward to it. And then, of course, we got the co-host, JD, is on the line. JD, say a little something.
What up? Hey guys, good to meet you. Excited to get this kick this interview off. Thankfully, I just realized that my microphone was muted this whole time, and I had been talking. So I'm glad that that's a fixed little foible.
Oh, that's funny.
We weren't ignoring you.
Quick question, JD, are you trying to look like Sasquatch? You planning on shaving during this quarantine?
No, I decided day one that I was not shaving, and I'm sticking to it, and I'm growing this mofo out, and we're going to see where it goes.
Bold man.
Well,
I like that.
My previous record is 6 months without shaving, so hopefully this quarantine doesn't last that long.
Okay. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Now, so the documentary is up on Amazon Prime right now for everybody to stream. If you have not watched it, check it out. We are going to get into the movie as we go. Now, Jim, how long has the movie been up on Amazon Prime?
It's been up on Prime for a couple months now, a little over 3 months, I believe.
Okay.
But, it got a little boost. It took off big when it first went on Amazon. We cracked the top 50 on iTunes, which was nice. And we wrote it out pretty steadily, but then 2 weeks ago, Sylvester Stallone himself posted on his Instagram. He called it a must-see documentary for all Rocky fans at 11 p.m. LA time, 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. He posted about our film, and it's been nuts since then. It's been it hit number 2 on Amazon as number 2 trending film for a couple days, and it's been hanging out up there, pretty nicely. So.
Yeah, what's amazing about that is whatever he did, all those views started to filter, and all of a sudden it's popping in everybody's recommendations. Like, it was the first thing that I saw when I went on Amazon Prime. It was The Pretender next to Rambo. And I was like, well, what's this? And I watched the trailer, and I'm like, well, obviously I'm watching this. And
it's a guy who should be on lithium. That's what The Pretender is about.
That's too cool.
That's awesome. So I want to start at the beginning. Mike, tell our audience a little bit here about just your first memory of watching that original Rocky movie.
Well, real quick, funny thing is Mike's never actually seen the movie.
Yeah, I don't know. All I know is I came up with this character Rocky that I'm trying to get a movie made out of it. I don't know what you're talking about.
All right, sorry about that.
What a wise guy. No, so in '79 I saw Rocky for the first time. I was 11 years old. On television is when I saw Rocky for the first time, and it blew my mind. My dad had suggested I watch it because I was having, some problems on the schoolyard and with bullies. I was a rather petite kid. I'm only 5'10". I'm not a rather tall guy. I'm like basically average. But at the time, I was like 3'4". So, I was like a bullseye for schoolyard bullies. And I I didn't have that thing to fight back, but I would use my mouth. Anyways, I saw Rocky that weekend, Sunday night, 1979, and it just changed my life. When you see those big white letters, ROC, bum, 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 it just blew me away. I mean, it was the first time I had really been inspired. And ever since, Rocky's been tattooed to my heart. And, I suppose we'll hear a few stories of how that played out. But that's how I found out about Rocky. My dad had heard about the movie, and he said, "Listen, there's this movie about this guy. He's Italian. We're Italian. Rocky's he's not exactly the greatest fighter in the world, but he keeps trying. Maybe you could pick up some tips."
Yeah.
And here we are.
That's great. Jim, how about you? What's your first memory of Rocky?
My first memory is watching it as a kid on TV. Also, probably had to be like Rocky 3, and I have two older brothers, and it was them kind of showing me, all right, Jim, it's time. You're ready. Here's Rocky. Introducing me to Rocky, and just all I remember is that feeling where you're a little kid. And you start to feel it, and like you're moving with it, you're shadow boxing, air, and that feeling is just the coolest thing, man. For a movie to do that to a kid or now an adult, you're kind of still taking the punches with Rocky. That stuck with me forever, and that's what inspired us to make this movie too. We wanted to make a movie like this that made people feel like this.
Yeah, that was one of the things I wanted to ask right off the bat is how you became involved in really telling Mike's story and when all that started for you guys.
Yeah, so it was, quite a few years ago that I met Mike. I actually met him on the set of Rocky Balboa, the sixth Rocky movie, and it was just by chance. And I was just getting into filmmaking, and I just thought, I'd do a little 5-minute film about Mike. I knew like I didn't have a lot of experience with the camera then, and I knew Mike's story was a good story, so I thought, well, the story will make up for my camera movements or my setbacks. So I thought I'll make a 5-minute piece. It'll be a cool portfolio thing, get people to look at my work. And then once I went down I'm in Detroit. Once I drove down to Pennsylvania to start shooting Mike, I was blown away. I mean, I couldn't believe, people tell you I'm the biggest fan, and I've seen the movie a million times. And then when I went down to see Mike, it was no bullshit. I mean, it was, you see his basement, you see all his collectibles. There was just proof everywhere. One of my favorite scenes in the movie is that blew me away when we first started filming was, Mike said, yeah, when I was a kid, I used to hit a punching bag. I'd go downstairs and I'd hit a heavy bag. And his dad said he used to hit the heavy bag. And I remember watching Rocky, and maybe for the next 72 hours, you're like, I'm going to train. I'm going to be a fighter. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Well, if you remember from The Pretender, there's proof. Mike he would knock this bag so hard and so often that he'd strip the wood. The eye bolts would strip the wood, and he'd have to pull it out and move it over 6 inches. So it'd stay in the ceiling, and then move it over 6 inches. And then, so there was proof of years and years of hitting this bag and becoming Rocky and, being motivated by Rocky. There was proof everywhere. And his parents really put me over the edge. Interviewing his parents just showed how much of Rocky was such a part of Mike's life and their life, and you could see how much his parents loved Mike. I shouldn't say past tense. They loved Mike.
Jim, a lot of scary stuff going on with COVID, Jim.
Yeah. No, you can see how much his parents really care about him, and they were worried about him at times, and they were proud of him at times, and all that stuff together was way too much to cram into 5 minutes. And I knew I'd regret it forever if I didn't do this correctly.
So then after that, you decided to make something more robust, something larger.
Exactly. I knew the 5 minutes couldn't contain it. And, I felt like if I didn't take advantage of this situation and go for it, someone else would, and that would really haunt me forever. I knew it was a good story. My gut told me it was a great story, and anyone that helped me work on it, as soon as they got involved, they were like, "Oh my God, this is so cool! This is such a cool story," and they'd be motivated in their own life just working on it one day or going on one of the shoots. So we definitely I had to see this thing through, especially with the help of my business partner, Danny Janino. Once he got on board, this thing I really started to feel like, all right, this is going to happen. This thing's really going to happen here. That was pretty long-winded.
No, that was good. See, I loved listening to and hearing, anybody talk about the creative process and what goes into taking from nothing and going to something. And it's just so fascinating. So, I mean, you mentioned earlier how you had an angle that you had thought that you had wanted to go, but then you pivoted. What was the process of coming up with the original storyline or narrative, and how did you go from that thought process of where you're like, yeah, this is going to be great, 5 minutes, to we're going to have a full-blown documentary on everywhere?
Yeah. So we went down to shoot Mike, one weekend, and we shot Mike at his house, and we did some things that you see in the film. And then, we had an opportunity to go shoot with Larry Holmes, former heavyweight champion. Great interview and really cool experience. We got some great stuff. And we had a couple other opportunities. We shot with Chuck Wepner, which inspired Stallone to create the character of Rocky Balboa. And another great interview. I mean, it was just awesome meeting the guy. But what started to happen is, we thought about making it a bigger documentary about like Rocky fans all over the world and people that had to do with the film, behind the scenes people inspired by the movie. And, a couple things happened. Number one, it was like just me starting this. There's just one guy. And it was a lot to wrap my brain around. It was a lot. I didn't have the resources, I thought, to do it justice if we did it that way. But even more powerful than that, or, more impactful, was Mike's story is symbolic of all these stories. To me, there's no bigger fan of Rocky Balboa than Mike Kunda. I'm not going to find a bigger fan or a more devoted fan or a fan that knows more than Mike. It's impossible, in my opinion. So I saw Mike's story as symbolic of everyone's Rocky story. And when I say Rocky's story, I mean their relationship with the movies, how much they liked it, that. But I also meant Mike's symbolic of everyone's Rocky story, meaning if you wanted to be the number one tennis player in the world and you were driven and you were motivated and you wanted to see your dream through, I think Mike's story is symbolic of that. If you wanted to be a doctor, I think Mike's story is symbolic of that too. So it was, how many times can I say symbolic? But no, I just feel like Mike's story, it told a lot of stories in a very simple way, much like the original Rocky movie.
Yeah. And that, Larry Holmes, I don't think a lot of people know him because he's not as big of a name as like Ali and Foreman and Tyson, those guys. But that guy fought in 4 decades, was a lineal heavyweight champion. Like that had to be amazing just to meet him.
7 years. 7 years he was the heavyweight champion with the fastest jab in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we went to Larry is because when I was a kid, Larry had given me, I wanted to be, of course, Rocky when I was like, 13. And so my father was a little concerned because there's no way that was going to happen. So he took me to a mutual friend of my dad's and Larry Holmes. And while we're talking he was a Lou Del Vecchio, he was a fight promoter. And while we were talking with Lou, Larry Holmes called Lou Del Vecchio, puts him on speakerphone, and he says, "Champ, I have young Mike Kunda here who wants to become Rocky. He wants to become champion. Can I put you on the phone, give him some advice?" And he does. And he goes, "Mike? Yeah, Larry Holmes. Hey, champ." I'm like 13 or 14 years old. I'm very nervous. And I'll never forget what he said. He goes to me, he goes, "You want to be a fighter?" "Yeah." He goes, "Well, listen, it's a lot of hard work. You got to make a bum drunk before you mug him." That's what he said. Okay, Jim. All these years later, what did Larry Holmes say when we started talking about that moment?
Well, the cool thing was Mike started that story. You got to get a bum, and Larry finished it drunk before you mug it. I thought, no way, this is insane. Yeah, that was really cool. And,
in other words, Larry scared the hell out of me not to become a boxer because he told me the beatings and what you have to really do. And, chasing chickens and punching raw beef is the least of it.
So, Mike, for you, like, how was that process for you to then, obviously you meet Jim, you guys start talking about this short documentary. It turns into this larger thing. What was that process like for you to put your trust in him to tell this story?
Honestly, I never thought it was going to come to be. I thought it was silly, and I thought it was ridiculous to do something like this. Nobody's going to care about it. And certainly, Stallone is never going to see something like this. It would be ridiculous to even waste your time. But Jim, to know Jim is to love him. He is a really great human being. He's a family guy. He's got an amazing wife, great kids, great family. So we had such a great bonding on the set of Balboa in Kensington. I don't know. We stayed in contact, and I just felt, how do you build trust with anyone? You just over time. And so through whether it was Facebook or online, whatever, you build up a rapport. And when he came to film, he was so genuine about it. He was, I will say his technical skills had me a little concerned. He bought a new camera, and as we were going to drive to Philly to film, he was asking his brother-in-law how the camera worked. And I thought, geez, this might not go exactly the way I had anticipated. And my wife said, she just nudged me like when she was out of earshot, and she goes, Mike, it's not like anybody else wants to film your life, so why don't you just sit back and enjoy it? I go, good point. So we just had a good time, and we said, okay, here we are. We put all our shit out there, and we just said, judge me. Go ahead. Give me your best shot. And Jim and his crew, Danny and his brother-in-law, Sean, and I forget Drago's name. Jim, what was Drago's name?
Jeremy.
Jeremy. Jeremy, this guy Jeremy reminded me of Drago. He had the height and a comparable face composition. Anyways, everybody was really into it, or they seemed to be into it, and there was a excitement every time we got together.
That's great. Jim, we kind of messaged back and forth a little bit earlier, and you're telling me a little bit about how long this process took as far as like filming and completion. But yeah, share that with our audience as well. Like when you guys began, when you wrapped.
Yeah. So, I think it took about 5 years to shoot everything, but it wasn't every day by any means. That we, when we first shot Mike, we went down there for a couple days to Pennsylvania, and then maybe it was like, we could go 6-8 months till we'd go shoot again, and then maybe a year or two went by, and then we'd go shoot again. It was whenever we could make it down there, or whenever Mike had something kind of big going on or something that we really wanted to capture, we'd go for it. But it was on and off for 5 years.
Wow.
We were all really surprised. We were really shocked. No one had been asking for a film about a deranged person who thought he was not. No one asked for that. Jim just went on his own. Maybe we could sell this lunatic to someone. I don't know.
Yeah. But like Mike's got a good point. I mean, and we talked about this before. Danny and I, my partner on this film, it was weird. Weird in a way, like, I have a family, Danny has a family, and anytime we had downtime, we'd work on this film. And, it was like, no one asked for this. We work for clients, we do a lot of commercial work, but it was like, no one asked for this. It's taking a lot of time. We're pouring our heart into this. What are we doing? I mean, we'd have these moments where we're debating like some minuscule piece of the film. Like, well, should we include the part where Mike says Rocky's more important than American presidents, or do we cut it, And then Yeah, yeah. We'd pace
Oh, that's a
around the
big
studio.
fact.
Yeah, yeah, right. And we'd pace around the studio, and have to talk about this stuff and take it dead serious. I mean, that was one of our filters was, we weren't laughing, we weren't, joking around or being, like fluffy with it. Anything we did, we went through it with like a serious filter, and I think that's where I hope that the heart comes out of this thing. Like we poured our hearts into it. We gave this project a lot of respect. But yeah, anyways, it took like 5 years because it was on and off when we could get down there to see Mike, and it was all self-financed too, so that was part of it.
Okay.
So that's
About 2 years ago. Yeah, go ahead.
From a technical standpoint, I find that very interesting because I imagine that technology has evolved and your skills had evolved. So what did that look like to all of a sudden realize that there was a better video format, there's a better way to be editing and capturing and doing everything that you had to do?
Great question. I'm glad no one's asked us that, and I'm glad you asked because
I ask weird questions.
I love it because that was a big thing, and this was like Mike said, that first time I bought that camera, it was a Panasonic HMC 150. I mean, this is like the first camera to come out with an SD card in it, like after mini DV tape. So we filmed with this thing, and it was a great camera. And when new cameras came out, we did talk about like, should we upgrade? We had new cameras. We have a ton of cameras at the studio, but we had this camera still. And I said, I think we keep going on this camera. And one of you guys, I forget who it was, brought it up. When we were chatting, it kind of looked like had like a 70s feel to it, almost like a film camera. And that was on purpose. We thought, man, this looks cool. This looks cooler than a DSLR. When the DSLRs came out, we thought this looked cooler, and kind of what put it over the edge. I was working at an ad agency, and we actually shot a little. They shot an M&M commercial, that M&M Chrysler commercial. We went kind of through our agency in a roundabout way. But one day I did some pickup shots with that Panasonic camera. They used one of the shots in the commercial, and when I talked to the editors, they said, "What camera was that? I love that camera. It matched our highest end cameras better than everything else." And I said, dude, it's a little Panasonic, old camera that I had. So that put it over the edge. I said, we're sticking with this camera. If it's good enough for M&M and the Chrysler commercial, let's keep going with it. So thanks for asking that, man. Seriously.
Oh, yeah, no, I love the technical, standpoint, what goes into actually creating what you did, because it's true. There's so much heart in what you did, and you captured it. But the role that technology plays in that, and being able to tell a story that maybe wouldn't have gotten told 20 years ago, it's just, to me, very fascinating. To stick on that kind of point, I'm curious to, you have 5 years worth of work that you put into this. How much footage did you capture? Did you have like hours upon hours, or was it this difficult to edit down to the length that you finalized it to be? Or, I mean, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, we had a lot of footage. If you were to put it into like, I don't know, like maybe there was a good, 14, maybe 3 weeks of footage, like that many days, 20 days of footage, let's say that we had to go through. But I'll tell you, the length kind of just came out to where it was. We thought like it falls just under an hour, and we never really paid attention to it. We just wanted to make sure that we told the story, that it didn't drag, or it didn't go on too long, but it was enough time to tell the story. So we let that just go. We let that open-ended. But what we did have a hard time doing was, trimming down. There was a lot of things that were said in different ways by different people. Like Mike's father, his interview was so cool, and he had a million, one-liners and ways of putting things. And a lot of times it was like he might have said like how much he loved Mike, how proud he was of Mike, or how concerned he was about Mike. And he'd say it, funny, in a funny way, in a heartfelt way, in a, a million different ways that were all cool. And it was just a hard time to pick which one do we go with, which one do we use, because we didn't want to be repetitive. We didn't want people to say, all right, I get it, he's proud of him. So we had to pick the best quote from his dad and use it. But same thing goes for Mike too. I mean, the way Mike would put certain things, the movie could have been 3 hours long, but it'd be so repetitive with the different great ways that he put things in perspective. Like I remember one of the quotes too. I haven't brought this one up in a while, but he was talking about the movie Over the Top, and he said something about, Mike, you probably remember saying this, but it was like something about it's the only arm wrestling movie you'll ever see where the guy gets a nosebleed.
Yeah, only Stallone could draw blood from the face in an arm wrestling movie. Arm wrestling, you don't touch the face. It's this. It's not this. And of course, Bull Hurley's like, "What's the matter, Hawks? That nosebleed?" And he punches him in the face. Okay, Sly, I think he'd be disqualified, but whatever.
Yeah. So
that's why we.
Of those.
Yeah, but that's why we love Sly. We love him because of that moment, that unexpected. He's got to be the underdog.
Yeah. So that was really tough. But other than that, we just ran it through a bunch of filters. Like I said, me and Danny, we were in that editing room pacing back and forth, and it was all about is it pushing the movie forward? Is Mike being is this as honest as he can be, which he always was, authentic. We just ran it through a couple of these filters to make sure we're telling the story the best way we could. And we spent a lot of time on that, man. We spent a lot of time on the different takes and what to use. So, yeah, that was a big part of it. It was a lot of fun.
What was funny, too, about a lot of that? I think a lot of the earlier shots were used more in the final edit, because I remember myself feeling much more comfortable earlier as the years went on and we were catching up and filming. I felt the pressure to perform in front of the camera. So I was being honest, but I was thinking, oh man, I really, some of that stuff was so good that we had done earlier. I got to make sure it's just good now, because I've had time to reflect 2 years over what had been filmed so far. And then I would see Jim and Danny look at each other and they go, that's kind of fake or pushed or acted. Not that I lied, but I was just, it wasn't natural. And, it's so, and they were right. They were right.
So when you say that you were sort of acting this out, were you acting as Mike in those instances, or were you acting as Sly or as Rocky? I mean, what was the motivation?
No, not like Sly or Rocky. I mean, I might have put a Rocky face on to be funny or whatever, but I wasn't. It was more like, oh yeah, Jim, I know what you mean. We can climb that hill. Come on, guys. We can fight. It was just not authentic. You know what I mean? Earlier in the movie, whatever I said just flowed. I was too much in my head later, and none of that stuff made it to the final edit, which Jim and Danny did a great job with.
Yeah. So a lot of times we get into impressions on this podcast, and my boy JD here does an amazing Christopher Walken. But for you, like Mike, when did you start to develop this Sylvester Stallone personality, all the traits, the voice? Like when did that start happening for you?
Right around the time I put a sign around my neck asking if I look like Rocky, that kind of started it. No. Sorry, that's a pathetic joke. Sorry. So right after it, I went to bed that night in '79 after watching Rocky, and I wrote on a gray sweatshirt, Italian Stallion, and I or to school the next day. And back in the 70s, teachers could hit you, slap you, punch you, humiliate you. That's just the way it was. And so because of my big mouth, I would disrupt class. Nobody noticed the sweatshirt. Nobody cared. But the teacher noticed. And the teacher brought me up in the class by the back of the neck and twirled me around like a ballerina and said, "Class, what's wrong with Kunda's sweatshirt?" And no one got it. And he said, "Okay, well, Italian stallion is spelled wrong." I'm basically an outcast. I'm the only friends I had were other outcasts. Like one kid, they called him Father Time. He had one arm shorter than the other. Another kid had a bad hair lip. All right. Another kid would mumble and he had a stutter. So this was the people that my peer group associated me with. So I always thought I was never good enough, or Mike Kunda would not be liked. I feel that way to this day, which is why my go-to is a Stallone style Rocky thing. So back then, my grandfather, who was an old coal miner, when I was 13, he realized I had this love for this simple, broken down boxer. And he gave me his old fedora and leather jacket. So in like the fall, I would walk around the streets of Scranton with a Walkman on, wearing the hat and the coat. I would angle the headset, and I had audio recorded Rocky. And so I would listen for like a minute and a half, and then I would hit pause. And then I would play, "Yo, Paulie, your sister's with me. I'll call you back later. See ya." Whatever. And then I would listen to it over and over and over until I got the inflections and the timbre of Stallone's voice as Rocky. Because I never thought I looked like Rocky. I never thought I sounded like Rocky. But if I could get the mannerisms down, if I could get the walk, the rolling of the shoulders, the sniffing, and whatever it was that Rocky was doing, if I could capture that, I think I could make it all work somehow.
Yeah. I got it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Quick. Yeah, just to support that, during the film festivals, Frank Stallone, Sly's brother, came out to one of the films, and I was talking to him, and he had already known about Mike, and he said what Mike just said. He said, "Man, Mike has got it down. No one can do my brother like Mike. He's got the, and he said, Frank went on to say, he's got the mannerisms down. He's got the," Frank went into detail. "There's a certain walk that my brother has." He refers to him as my brother. A certain walk my brother has that Mike has down pat. And Sylvester Stallone's brother Frank was blown away, and it was such a trip for him to be telling me this. I'm like, I know, man. I've been filming him for 5 years. But
who was standing next to him when he told you that?
We were outside, just standing there talking. Yeah.
That was it Nick Villalongo with you?
Oh yeah, and then Nick Villalongo was there. Yeah, the producer and writer of Green Book. Yeah.
Yeah, he just won the Oscar. Yeah. So when you're getting that going on, it's like, wow, that's like really kind of a cool thing. But so at any rate, that's kind of when that all started. But then Rocky went away for a little bit when I had to get like a full-time job, and I met a girl and I fell in love, and all these things. And then I would pull Rocky out every so often as a personality tick. And I thought I was doing just fine. And my wife would say, "Bring it down with the Rocky, okay? Too much." Because and now it's different now. Like that's 20 years ago. Now I think, and this is all in my mind, now I feel there's a certain expectation when people meet me for the first time in my personal life and they know what I do. I feel they're looking at me and judging me, and they say, "This guy don't look like Rocky. This guy don't sound like Rocky." And so I think I have to compensate for that because I am really an extremely insecure guy. And so what I'll do, I'll greet them and I go, "Hey, how you doing? Hi, nice to meet you." "Yeah, okay, The voice gets a little deeper, the lip gets a little more crooked, and Rocky comes out a little bit. So about halfway through dinner, if we have a glass of wine, my lower lip becomes, "Yo." So my wife will just lift my lip. She goes, Rocky's coming out. I go, oh shit! I didn't even realize that. And so sometimes I don't know where that line is. I mean, I do, but sometimes I get carried away. Anyways, that was a bit of a ramble. Sorry.
No, I find that so interesting from like a psychological standpoint as well, because as being somebody that is like super insecure and deals with like the same kind of odd man out, oddball kind of scenario that you definitely presented, that I can relate to that. And I read an interesting story a few years back about Owen Wilson, who was in the same boat. And when he was just trying to break into acting, he was working as a waiter at a restaurant, and he used to use that as an opportunity to try out new characters. So he would take his own, like, instead of being Owen Wilson as the waiter, he'd be, Rocky or something like that. And that's what he would do to get over that awkwardness of meeting new people or talking to people or stuff like that. So, it's definitely something that a lot of people face, especially in Hollywood. So I just find that interesting.
It's funny you say that, because I think that's one of the things that's deep. Wow. Yeah, we're gonna need some cigars and liqueur. This is gonna be like a self-help group. No, seriously, I think you're right, and I think that's one of the things. Like, I'm not a big guy that wants to throw messages around, but if there's one thing I could say about The Pretender, that's one of the things I think resonates with so many men and women just everywhere, because we all have insecurities. We pretend that we don't, or we cast them to the side, and we move through life. But those insecurities are with us, and usually whatever we have in our teenage years, that shit's with us. It's like Louis Vuitton luggage. It doesn't go away. You just have that forever. And I think when they see, oh my God, this guy took his insecurity and he rammed it down the throats of the people that said he couldn't do it or that he shouldn't do it. And it took a long time, but here I am still standing. And so if other people have dreams, whether you're 50, 60 years old and you want to go back to college, whether you want to start your own podcast when there's like 10 billion podcasts out there, and all of a sudden yours is rising. You have 2, 3, 4, 5,000, 10,000, 1 million followers. Nothing is improbable. Nothing is improbable. And I just hope people follow their passions.
Wow. That's an amazing point. Go ahead, JD.
I was just saying, I agree with that. And I think I love the parallel between your story and, Rocky's story. And everything that you're saying that matches up and is so relatable, because I think there's a quote at one point in the movie where you refer to Rocky as not necessarily being a sports movie, but being about a much deeper entity to it.
It's a love story. Rocky is a love story. It was conceived and now Stallone has told me this several times. He's quoted as this. Today, if you go watch, he's got 14-minute video on his Instagram site. One of the questions he answers is, Rocky a sports movie or a love story? And he goes, oh, Rocky's a love story. He happens to have an athletic job, but it's a love story first and foremost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, we cover a lot of movies, and so the movie that we're doing this month is Teen Wolf, which is like the exact opposite of that, where it's a sports movie disguised as a rom-com. But I'd be curious to what their in-depth analysis of that would be, of Teen Wolf sports rom-com sci-fi monster movie.
Yeah.
I was doing some. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just I can't wait till you guys dig into that final scene right at the end with the extra gone rogue.
Oh, I always pause it just to make sure it's real.
I know. I hate to even admit this, but I was showing my kids it a couple days ago. I said, look at this. Watch this scene closely. They're like, oh my God, Dad. Anyway.
That's funny.
There's a couple of those like soundtrack songs in Teen Wolf that has a very Rocky vibe to it.
Oh yeah.
And I love the music for all the Rocky movies, but I want to use that as a transition to talk about Cue the Rocky Music, which is a book or a memoir that you had written, Mike. I haven't had a chance to really look into it too much, but it'd be a good time for you to plug it and talk about it a little bit.
So, if nothing else, it's a great book to kill spiders with, or if you're training your 7-year-old to be a model to keep it straight from falling. But if you're into reading, if you are into reading, so here's the genesis of Cue the Rocky Music. So I called it Cue the Rocky Music because every time I was afraid, whether I was going to try out for the wrestling team, the football in high school football team, I was going to go for a job interview or ask a girl to the school dance, I would put the Rocky Music soundtrack in the Walkman. I would press the button or I would cue the Rocky music to give me just enough courage to try. And I largely failed, but it's not, and it's funny, but it's very funny, but it's not about failing. It's about the continuing journey of trying, because so many times you try so much and then that's it. I'm done. I failed it 100 times. 101 time could be the time you make it. You don't know, which is why you must always keep trying. So Cue the Rocky Music started as basically a love letter to Stallone. At that point, I had spent about a dozen encounters with Sly. They ranged from walking down the street in New York City to turning the corner, there he was, to a casino in Atlantic City, to several Planet Hollywood openings. And I had built up enough of running into him. I was starting to get to a point where I could have conversations with them and not, piss myself. So what I realized after I got fired from my corporate job in 2008, I realized I had no other marketable skills. I didn't know what I was going to do. And this is when the economy just crapped the bed. So as I'm out looking for jobs, and by the way, no one's hiring a guy with no marketable skills in any area other than lifting shit. So I come home from another fruitless job search, and I said, I think I know. I said, you know what, honey? I never said thank you to Stallone for what he did with Rocky in an appropriate way. I never was, nor did I ever want to be that guy. Yo, Sly, oh my God, I saw you in Rambo. You jumped out the tree. You sewed up that shit. You never want to be that guy. You want to be cool with him. And I never thanked him. I never really said, Sly, thank you for what you did as Rocky. And it played on me for about a year and a half. So I said, I'm going to write this book. And it's essentially, I'm going to tell Sly how I won this national lookalike contest in 2006. And I'm trying to do something with it. But it wasn't ready to take off quite yet. So the problem here is that I flunked out of high school and I don't know how to write. So how do you write a book? So I watched YouTube tutorials, and my wife, who's incredibly supportive, she bought me books how to write, like a screenplay, a story, whatever. And so I got some software, and bingo, bango, I did it. I get it published, and now I got to get the book to Sly, which if anyone has seen The Pretender, they will see whether or not I get the book to Sly. And that's what the book was. It tells the journey. It's somewhat like The Pretender, but it's a little more involved on how I feel. The Pretender is why I do what I do, and the Cue the Rocky Music is how I did it on top of why. And of course, I talk about my dogs in the book too, which I love.
That's great. And now one of the things that I really love at the end is, it's really kind of the best part of the story is you turn this love of Rocky into a legitimate business, and one of the top rated tours in all of Philadelphia. And I mean, honestly, me and JD were texting about earlier, like that's like a bucket list thing for me. Like I want to come there and do that tour and just go all over the city. And it has to be done.
There's a few things that makes my tour a little different from everybody else's. One, Sylvester Stallone has endorsed it.
Yep.
Two, he has told me a great deal of stories. So things that aren't out in the internet, on the internet, he has shared these stories, and I pass these stories on to those who take the tour. But it's not just Stallone. I became somewhat acquaintances with Burt Young, and he invited me out to his house one afternoon. So I sat with him for about 5 hours, just literally milking his teats for Rocky stories. Okay. So
We did
there's
not.
that.
We did not film that milking of the teeth.
No,
Not
it's a
Bill
missed opportunity, but yeah.
Burt Young's teeth. But it was quite an extraordinary time there with him, listening to these old Rocky stories that aren't in book form anywhere. So and then I happen to know a lot of people in Philadelphia who were directly involved with the filming, the locations, and they were in the movie. They had a couple of one-lines here and there, but then they also became good friends with Stallone. And so I have all these stories coming into me. Then I have 40 years of collecting magazines from around the world and news stories and interviews with Stallone. So I would collect magazines from Italy, France, Jesus, I don't know, anywhere. And but they were in this other language. And I barely speak English. So I had to have the Italian magazine converted, the Spanish magazine converted. And these are rare things, hard to find. And so I wrote it down, the key elements. And these are things that aren't in American magazines. So I have all this knowledge and I pass it on, which is why, like, if I had to say, people say, well, like, what are you? How do you see yourself? I'm like an ambassador to Rocky Land. You know, I mean, that's basically how I see myself. And so that's what we do. And we have a lot of fun. Tours are usually about 3.5, 4 hours, depending on traffic. And we hit some pretty incredible locations.
That's amazing. Yeah. And just to kind of piggyback off of that for a second, I'll do a little bit of bragging for you. You have 284 reviews. 282 of them are 5-star. The other 2 are 4. So pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. You know, the other 2, it killed me because the problem that they had was when you go, we always end at the Rocky Steps.
Yeah.
And when you go to the Rocky Steps, there are the hustle is on, and you have these semi-homeless people who take pictures. Now, they actually do a great job, but they have a lot of emotional damage done to them. And one guy actually went to when he was in high school, he had gone to a working farm for a class trip. He had been accidentally kicked in the head by a mule, and so he had some brain damage. So they start fighting with, that's not true, I just made that up. But there's guys with issues there, okay? And they fight each other to take pictures of the tourists at the Rocky Steps. And they say, okay, we work on tips. And so that's how they go. So they were somewhat aggressive, and I was at the bottom of the hill because, see, I have to stay with my tour van when we come to the steps. You're only allowed to park there for a few minutes. So I unload, everybody runs up, takes their pictures, and come back down, you know, whenever they're ready. And if I have to move, I drive around. So I forgot to mention about the guys being there, and they were very upset about that. And that's why I got 2 4s. Oh, well.
Could be worse. My family owns a restaurant. We're very we're very used to getting like 1 stars, and people are like, food tastes bland. I'm like, we literally win awards for best tasting. But thank you.
Let me ask you that. How do you reconcile that when you win these awards for great food? How is it? Is it just an idiot? Like, what happens?
We own a pizzeria, and I do all the social media marketing, so I deal with all of that stuff. And it's just like some of those people you just like we had a guy yesterday who was upset that his pizza was greasy, and he ordered a large pepperoni pizza, and we have a lot of toppings. I'm like, maybe you should have asked for light pepperoni and you would have got a lot less grease. Like, what do you want us to do about pepperoni being greasy? It's just like, man.
He's probably the same guy that argues his cotton balls are too soft. You know, it's just like, what is the issue? Jesus.
Yeah, so we just kind of we get so many positive ones. If there's a negative one, it's just like it's bound to happen. Good. Yeah. So
that's good. Where are you guys at in the country?
So I'm in I grew up in Northwest Indiana, which is about 45 minutes outside of Chicago. Okay. And then JD, go ahead.
And I'm in Chicago.
Gotcha. But you guys don't have the hard R's at the bar and the car.
I spent a lot of time like breaking down my accent so I don't sound like an Italian from Chicago.
Okay, that's Jim. Jim, give him a little hard R.
I got a lot of grief. I got a lot of grief shooting in Philly with the Detroit accent. I'm thinking, you guys are the ones with the accent, right?
No, it was after I watched the movie Anchorman, and they talk about having a non-regional dialect, and I was like, you know what? I need to really just drop the way that I talk and come up with something bland that works for me professionally. So,
well, you sound awesome.
Well, thank you.
So, Jim, I coming back to you, one of the things that I'm sure is annoying for people that make movies and in films is it's always, what are you doing next? And it's like, can I just bask in this for a minute? But I have to ask, like, is there anything coming up? Do you have a next project?
Yeah, we have a couple. My partner and I have a couple things that we're kind of kicking around. And one thing that I guess we're the furthest along on right now is another documentary, and it's again like character driven, you know, like The Pretender, but it's about a comedian in New York City. It's kind of an up and coming comedian. He does stand up, and he's like a comedic writer and a comedic coach, and he's also a rabbi.
Oh,
so there's
sold.
A couple other interesting things going on there with them, but that's the one that we're furthest along with right now. And we have a couple other things that we're cooking up, but this one might seems like it's pretty feasible.
Yeah, that's a excellent idea. It almost reminds me of like it's the kind of story that, like, even to Mike's point, like your story is the kind of story that like it's so realistic that it doesn't seem real.
Yeah,
and you're
like you couldn't make it up, right?
Yeah, like that's awesome, man. That's very cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now's the time of the show where we get to fanboy over some Rocky questions and put you guys in some tough spots here. So
I actually have one too here for Mike.
Oh, awesome! Can't wait.
So, can I go first, real quick?
Yeah, do it. Of course.
While I got you, Mike, it's been 5 years. I just have one more question for you.
Yeah.
No, but
yes,
I heard Stallone say that he used to go by the name Mike. Mike Stallone. What is that all about?
When he was going from school to school, every year he got kicked out of school because he had ADD and he was a troublemaker. So right away, when he was like in second, third grade, when you walked into the class, Sylvester, Tweety Bird, Sylvester the cat, they just made fun of him because of the Sylvester. Yeah. So he told his mom this, and she said, well, why don't you come up with another name? And he goes, what could I do? You know what? The name Mike. Mike is a good name right down the middle. You can't make fun of a Mike. Mike is what it's going to be. And he went with Mike for quite a while. That was what it was. Yeah.
How strange. Wow. I think you mentioned that a long time ago when we were filming you, but I heard it come up today or something recently. The Mike's
today.
And your name's Mike, right?
My name is Mike, Jim. Isn't that?
So Sly is playing you.
Like Twilight Zone.
Yeah. Anyways, cool. That was my honest to God question.
So, Mike, one of my first ones here is, I know you've met several of the cast members. What are, you've talked about a few of them already, but what are some of your favorite interactions that you've had with cast members from Rocky?
I mentioned one earlier. Is it okay to mention it again real quick?
Yeah.
Okay. So I got hired to be a door greeter at a Comic-Con in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, a few years back. And it was Carl Weathers' first signing, okay? No, I'm sorry. It was Horror Theater or something. And he was there for Predator.
Yep.
That's why, that was the main reason.
Hound.
Okay.
Yep.
And so nobody cared about Predator. Cherry Hill's right across the bridge from Philly, so they were there to see Apollo Creed.
Yep.
So on a hunch, I said to myself, okay, when I get done being a door greeter as Rocky, I'm going to bring that painting, that black and white painting I did. My dad was with me and my manager who gets me all of my gigs. And I said, okay, I'm going to go into this room and I'm just going to bulldoze my way in and see if I could get anything. So everybody, the guards that were like, you know, guarding the door to make sure everybody had their tickets, you had to pay $100 to get in. They saw me as Rocky and they go, oh, you're doing a Rocky Apollo thing, right? And I looked at everybody and I go, yeah, we are. He goes,
Obviously. Obviously. Come on.
Obviously. So here I am at the back of the room and the table is up the front and there's 500 fans sitting in seats waiting to go 20 at a time in line. Carl is sitting at a table signing.
Mm-hmm.
And I yell out in my best Rocky voice, yo, Apollo, I thought you said there weren't going to be no rematch. And Carl does one of these. He leans around everybody at the table and he goes, Stallion, you got a dull skull, Stallion. He jumps up. He comes around the table and he goes, get up here, chump. Let's finish this fight right here, right now. So I hand the painting to my father. I go up like Rocky Southpaw. I got the hat, the leather jacket, and we start dancing in a circle. And he starts banging out these jabs, and they're whiffing the brim of my hat.
Yeah.
And I remember telling myself, do not lean forward. He will break your face. Now, Carl Weathers, I'm 5'10". Carl Weathers is about, I don't know, he's like 6'2", but he must have had heels on because he was like 6'3". He was just a mountain of a man. So anyways, we danced around and I got to jab with Apollo Creed for maybe 40, 50 seconds. He puts my arm up in victory, winner and champion. And then he asked the crowd, do you all mind if I sit for 2 minutes with Rocky? And they were like, go ahead, yeah, it's it. So he goes, come on, Rocky, have a seat here with me. And as I sit down, he simply says to me, does Sly know about you? I go, yeah, a little bit. He does. And then I gave him a copy of Cue the Rocky Music. And I said, listen, Carl, I got this painting that I did a long time ago. I said, I got Sly to sign it. I said, would you be interested in signing it? And he goes, absolutely. What do you want me to sign? And I was going to have him sign like Eye of the Tiger Man or something, right? And he said, how about this? Let's sign Ain't Gonna Be No Rematch, because that's basically what he says in the next scene. And I go, perfect. So he signs it. And I was teasing him because it was my birthday. And I said, I had to drive, because at the time I lived a little further away. And I said, can you believe this, Carl? I came all the way here just to see you on my birthday. You screwed up my birthday plans. And so it was just a nice, fun thing back and forth. And, Carl was a nice guy. I wish I had I hope I get a chance to meet Talia Shire.
Yeah.
She's the one I want to talk to the most because I love the woman's view of Rocky because it's the woman that makes Rocky the champion. Yeah, he's got the muscle and the strength and the heart and the skill, but he can't do it if he is not emotionally connected to his partner, which is so important. I think people tend to settle sometimes in life. So if you could find the right partner to help you make it through, I think we all become so much more valuable to society in that way because we can contribute more, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, she's very quiet. You don't hear a lot from Talia Shire.
Do you know why?
No.
Because she's counting her royalty checks from Godfather and Rocky. 1 million in 1, 1 million in 2, 1 million in 3.
Right.
She's just enjoying life. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Absolutely. So this next one's going to be tough, and everybody's going to get put on the spot with this one. We got to rank the Rocky movies.
Sure.
So we'll do 1 through 6. We'll leave Creed as its own standalone, but 1 through 6. Jim, I'll start with you.
Okay.
What do you got?
All right. I'm going to go, the original is number 1.
Yep.
I know you don't want the Creeds in there, but I would say Creed 1 next. I love Creed 1. I love Stallone in it. He plays a guy his age. I just love that movie. But so I'll say that, but I'll go back. So I'd say Rocky 1, 3, 2, 4, Balboa, and then 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. JD?
I didn't love Balboa.
Okay.
I know Mike disagrees.
Jim, why don't you just hang up now, Jim?
And, I'll listen to your answer off air.
Yeah. Do that, tough guy.
All right, JD, how about you?
Oh, it's a tough one because for me, and when it comes to how I judge and rank movies, I oftentimes base it on the villain. I'm a very evil person, or maybe that sounds wrong, but I tend to identify with the motivations of who I think essentially are the underdogs, at least from a narrative perspective, where, Rocky's obviously the underdog in the first Rocky movie, but Apollo Creed plays the part of a villain, or a foil at least, to Rocky, and he does such an excellent job in doing it. So when I look at the Rocky movies, I look at who I think is the greatest foil to Rocky. And so for me, I definitely think Clubber Lang plays that in a lot of ways. So I say Rocky 3 goes first. And then it falls out just naturally. Then obviously I love the original Rocky movies. It's a better movie by far. It's a much better quality film. But I tend to go Rocky 2, Rocky 4, Balboa, then Rocky 5.
Poor Rocky 5 gets no.
Did not like Rocky 5.
I'll get my list real quick. So for me,
I like your ranking system though on the bad guy. That's cool.
Yeah, it makes it fun anytime that you can identify in a movie, a film, a story, whatever you're looking at, and say there has to be a good guy and a bad guy. And the worse the bad guy is, the harder it is for the good guy to be the good guy. So it's the reason why I say Happy Gilmore's such a good movie, because Shooter McGavin is such an awful bad guy.
Yeah, he also eats pieces of shit for breakfast. So. But that's great. So my list would go the original Rocky, and then I go the Rocky 4 because I love his fight with Drago, and then I go back to 2 because I like to see him beat Creed, and then I go to Clubber Lang 3, Balboa 6, and of course Rocky 5, dead last. Unfortunately, I actually really love Tommy Morrison though, so it's a shame that movie is not better than it is. All right, Mike. Let's hear your list.
All right. First of all, my head is spinning from all these ridiculously ranked ways, but
I knew it. I knew.
I have never.
I knew he was fuming.
The gloves are on.
I have never heard such unique, eclectic ranking between 3 people. All right. So I'm going to say mine in a moment, but I do want to preface all of that with, in my heart, I honestly feel there is no wrong answer here.
Right.
Because it's like me trying to tell you what's your favorite music. Oh, well, I like to gig out to, I don't know, Lady Gaga or, Dean Martin. No, you don't want to listen to them. They suck. You want to listen to Jerry Lewis sings I'm Coming to East Street. So it's ridiculous. You like what you like, so there's no wrong answer. Okay. So I'm going to tell you, but you're all wrong. So here's the rankings. It's Rocky 2, Rocky Balboa, Rocky 3, Rocky 5, and always dead last, Rocky 4. Wow. Rocky 4 is probably the worst Rocky movie. Now, that doesn't mean I don't love it, and that does not mean it's bad. I have love for all of them. I just have less love for Rocky 4 because we never see Rocky in Rocky 4. We see Sylvester Stallone showing up wearing Rocky's clothes. Gone is the humble, innocent type of guy that skates across the ice and is Yes. Gone is that character. That innocence is gone.
Yeah.
I think the realm of the heavyweight champion being changed was very accurate portrayed in Rocky 3. Rocky 1, 2, and 3, that's great. I really believe that. When you get to Rocky 4, just to show you how crazy over the top it is, when Rocky is training in Siberia, running through the snow, the rivers, the forest, up the cliff, top of the mountain, screams out Drago, sun is setting, how's he get back to the cabin? How's he get back?
That's a good question.
Does the robot show up with propeller blades? I mean, I could just see Paulie's in the Trans Am coming up around. Rocco, remember the neighborhood. Come on, we got to go. I mean, how does he get back? For that matter, in Rocky 2, after he's running up the steps, he's got 800 kids from Philadelphia running around, jumping, pumping their fists in the air. The music is at a fever point, and then it stops. And then we cut to Apollo Creed and Rocky the night before the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's go back to that moment for a second. Rocky's done. He's panting heavy. He's just ran like 30 miles, and he's looking around. He's like, how do I get home? What does he do after he runs the steps? He's just run out of energy. He's done. How does he get home? Does he take a bus? Does he get on the subway? Does he walk 3 miles back to South Philly? How does he get back? These are the questions that should be keeping the world up at night, not whether or not and coronavirus is coming back. How does Rocky get home? No one is answering these questions.
I feel like that might be like a massive plot hole in like every Stallone movie. Nobody ever knows how he gets back home.
Yeah.
I need to look into this. It's a rabbit hole.
I tell you, Clubber Lang is my absolute favorite opponent. I absolutely adore, I love that character. The name, Clubber Lang. Prototype for Tyson. I mean,
yep.
I loved Clubber Lang. Totally, 100%.
Yeah, good. And, coming from Chicago and having that background and connection to Clubber Lang and just being that poor kid out of nowhere, he is essentially a new Rocky because he's Clubber Lang and he just love it.
Yeah, you could almost do the Cobra Kai turn the prism, right, and see it all through Clubber Lang's eyes.
Wow.
The underdog.
Yeah. Oh, I love it.
I love that idea. That'd be awesome.
Jim, you're a filmmaker. Get to work on it.
I know. No kidding. No kidding.
So last Rocky question, because I know you, Mike, you just have an amazing collection of Rocky merchandise and all that stuff. What's your favorite piece of merchandise or memorabilia?
Pretender poster.
Yeah, the Pretender poster.
I'm kind of hoping for the Rocky pinball machine, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Horizon. I have a direct contact to buy that. Unfortunately, COVID has me with my thumbs up my ass, and I'm not getting any money coming in because of my tours.
Yeah.
So, but that is on the horizon. It's more affordable than you would think.
Yeah.
It's only at about 14,000. It's not that bad.
Jump change.
It really is. It will compare to what the director of The Pretender made off this thing. Are you kidding me?
We have 4 of them. We have 4 pinball machines. If you want to play one, bring a quarter.
Nice. You see how it is, guys? This is what I had to deal with for 5 years. Yeah. So, okay, I showed you this before, and I'll show it to you one more time. This is my favorite collectible. It's not a collectible. This is something I painted. If the house burns down, I'm running down here to grab this painting because this signature, I would never pay for Sylvester's signature. This came as a result of a very deep and meaningful conversation, and I asked him if he would sign it, and he said, I'd love to sign it. And he asked me, I don't ever want to see this on eBay because what you did here, you captured the nobility of Rocky, and it's better than that. Don't ever sell it. So that's why this means so much to me. I'd say second to that, Jesus, my Jaws, my randomly place.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a McFarlane. I'm not 100% sure. So it would be the painting, and let me just see if I have one other thing. I do love the championship belt.
Yes.
That's one of my favorites. And this is the soup cup that Mickey drinks out of in Rocky 2. That's a favorite of mine too.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Isn't that
gosh,
stuff cool?
Mickey's so underrated.
Mickey's underrated. Is it okay if I show you guys the one other thing not Stallone related?
You can show us as much as you want to show us because I'm loving this.
As long as your pants are
Oh
on.
my God, yes. Turbo Man.
It's turbo time with Rock'em Sock'em grips. Dad, I gotta have it for Christmas. This is my favorite. And when you press the middle button right there, it literally goes, it's turbo time. Oh, it's fantastic.
Just so you know, on this podcast, we have talked about that movie several times as being one of our favorite Christmas movies of all time.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorites.
That is just freaking awesome. Okay, so so getting away from the Rocky movies, but talking a little bit more about Sly. Do you have a favorite non-Rocky Sly movie?
Sure. Nighthawks, I thought was brilliant. Paradise Alley, Fist, Cliffhanger, Copland. Copland was really, really good. I got to tell you, I really got to side with Jim Toscano on Creed. I just thought what Sly acting his age was paramount. And First Blood. I mean, my God, I think First Blood is almost a perfect movie. There's just one small problem with it, and other than that, First Blood is perfect.
Okay, great. Jim, how about you?
For me, I'd say Cobra and Over the Top. I love Over the Top for just the pure kid enjoyment of it, man. It's just, I mean, I remember, again, like being a kid and going around the bowling alley challenging my friends to arm wrestling matches for quarters. It was like one of those movies that was just too fun. And Cobra, man, Cobra is just all style. It's all 90s, 80s, 90s dystopian style. And I'd love to see like some kind of new Cobra movie, like Cobra meets Taxi Driver, just something that takes Cobra character a little bit more serious, a little bit darker, and update it. Oh man, I'm dying for something like that. So those are my two films outside of Rocky that I really are Stallone all the way. And I do like Paradise Alley a lot too. I feel like that's like the underdog to Rocky. That's a cool movie. But
here's something you guys may not know. There was a lawsuit with Paradise Alley. Stallone wrote Paradise Alley before he wrote Rocky, and he sold it for like $200. And Stallone took some ideas from Paradise Alley and incorporated it into Rocky. And then he got sued for it. And he said, how can you sue me for my own work? He goes, I wrote this. So there was a whole long thing. I would advise you guys, if you so care, Google the Stallone Paradise Alley Rocky connection. It's a great, fascinating read. It really is.
Absolutely. Check that out. So we often talk about food on here, and since you spend a lot of time in Philadelphia, Mike, maybe you can educate our audience here. If they're in Philly and they've obviously are going on your tour while they're there, where should they be eating prior to maybe meeting up or afterwards with you? What are some hot spots there?
There are there are 3 places I would suggest. When you get to Philadelphia, you're going to be a little tired from your traveling. You're going to check into your hotel. You want to go to the Reading Terminal Market. That's the very first place to go. It's literally an indoor Italian market with it's half food and half eclectic mom and pop shopping. It's fantastic. Okay.
Taking notes. Continue.
Second, I would suggest going to Pat's Steaks. Not only is it a Rocky filming location, that's where Gazzo gives Rocky $500 for training expenses, but they also have incredible cheesesteaks and really great French fries. And the coup d'etat, the kill shot, comes in going to the Victor Cafe, which is the very restaurant they used for filming Adrian's in Rocky Balboa and the Creeds. The food is the best Italian food on the East Coast. It's run by my dear friend Greg and Alexa DeStefano. It's been in the family for about 100 years, the DeStefano family, and it's remarkable. It's part of my tours. We go through there. I get the place to myself. I tell a lot of stories. When the owners are there, they come over. They tell stories what it was like with Sly, and it's fascinating if you're a Rocky fan.
Wow, that's cool because that's kind of what Sly does in the movie, and that's what they do at the restaurant. Was that something they did after that, or were they already doing that?
No, they had been doing that for a while.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's really remarkable. The place it's as every bit as beautiful and gorgeous as it appears in the movie, and it just smells so good. It's so sexy inside. When you go inside, here's what it smells like. This is why I think it's sexy. It smells like shaved garlic, Parmesan cheese, crushed oregano mixed in virgin olive oil. I swear to God, if there's ever a decline in the population, you just douse this on everyone, and everyone's going to be together.
I can smell it already.
Oh my God, I can smell it too. As a matter of fact, I gotta go. Oh, no, I'm kidding.
Well, that was actually perfect because that was my last question. And man, thank you guys so much for coming on the show. And yeah, definitely want to plug your guys' social media in the movie one more time. Jim, where can everybody follow Pretender Movie on like Instagram, Twitter, and website and all that stuff?
Yep. So our website is thepretendermovie.com. We're super active on Instagram. Just look up the Pretender Movie. Same on Twitter and Facebook. We try and answer as many people as we can. It's been pretty nutty the last couple of weeks, but it's been a ton of fun. So, keep it coming. And you can see the film on Amazon Prime, iTunes. It's on Tubi. And for people, we're getting a lot of people out of the country looking for it. And we found the best way to get it to them is Vimeo on demand for anyone outside of the United States.
Awesome. And Mike, where can everybody follow you at?
Please come check me out. Instagram, the Yo Philly Rocky Film Tour. It's awesome. Sly comments on a lot of the things I post. He follows me. He likes a lot of stuff, so it's a great way to see more interaction with Sly telling more stories on some of the things that I have been posting. And it's all very loving. There's no negativity. It's about 97% Rocky and maybe 7% there's a bit of a Christmas element that I enjoy.
That math adds up. I love it. Perfect. So, hey, thank you guys again for coming on. This has been amazing. And yeah, everybody go out and support these guys. Check out the film on Amazon Prime, or if you're out of the U.S., get it on Vimeo on demand. Thanks again, guys. This has been really fun.
Yeah, thanks, awesome. Guys. Thanks so much.
Guys, we'll see you.
Okay, guys, we just wrapped amazing interview with the guys from The Pretender. Big shout out to Jim and Mike for coming on the show. That was a ton of fun. JD, I guess your first impressions right off the bat, what do you think about our interview?
It's a great group that we just got to chat with. Again, the documentary is fantastic, but being able to hear these stories about the filmmaking process, and then everything that Mike had to say about being the star of the show and growing his brand was just really neat. I don't know. I appreciate you, Kyle, for setting all of this up, and for Jim and for Mike for taking the time to talk about your pet project with us, and check out the documentary for sure.
Yep, streaming on Amazon Prime right now. Get over there and check it out, and then follow the movie at the Pretender Movie on Instagram, and then you can follow Mike at I Look Like Rocky, and then they have a website as well, thepretendermovie.com, and they do have a limited number of their posters for sale, and the poster art for the movie is actually really cool. So check that out. Support those guys. Thanks for listening. We will be back in a couple days with some new episodes for you guys. But in the meantime, enjoy our retro episode of Rocky that'll play just a couple days after this interview drops. Thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you in a couple days. See ya.
Yo, Adrian.
No. Leave that to Mike.
Yes.